Very good. Now, moving on. Are you team Android or are you team Apple? Well, either way, you'll be interested to hear about the latest updates to both operating systems. Now, we have our usual panel with us today. We've got Sean and JP and Daniel, who'll be getting involved in different parts of the show. But maybe just to start off with today, we can ask our panel a couple of questions on the iOS 14 release. Can you remind us when was iOS 14 actually released?
Sure. Hi, Jude. Yeah, so I can just remind everyone that iOS 14 was announced back in June this year at the Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference, and became available for public download on Wednesday, 16th of September.
Okay, so what version of that? Because there's different versions, isn't there?
Correct.
Yeah, iOS 14.
The latest version is iOS 14.1, and that was released just over a week ago, on the 20th of October. I actually just installed it there last night.
Okay.
That's 14.1.
iOS 14.1. So
yes.
If I've got an iPhone, does it matter what iPhone I have? Am I automatically going to get iOS 14 now? Is my phone able for it?
Yeah. Well, obviously it would depend on the iPhone you have. iOS 14 is compatible all iPhones from the iPhone 6S and later. So that actually includes the first generation iPhone SE. I know we have the second generation that was released, iPhone SE released this year, but also includes the first generation iPhone. That actually happens to be all the iPhones that support iOS 13 as well. So it's an interesting point. Yeah, so also worth pointing out though that there's certain features on iOS 14 that may not work on some of the older models of iPhone. So just to give you an example would be the new back tap feature that will only work on the iPhone 8 and onwards. So even though you might have the latest version of iOS 14 on your phone, there may be some features that may not work if it's an older iPhone that you have.
Okay, interesting. Now you mentioned the back tap feature there, and that's kind of one of the things that would have an accessibility aspect to it as well, of course. So can you talk us through some of the other accessibility?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. I can go through some of the highlights. Yeah, exactly. And just kind of think back to last year, we had iOS 13 and we had several accessibility kind of improvements, enhancement there. I mean, we had things like, with like accessibility, then it was moved into the settings, higher up in the settings app, so given a more kind of prominent position, so it was easier to find. We can think back, we had a new dark mode that appeared on all the Apple's native apps, so very helpful for people with glare sensitivity. We even had things like disability themes emojis, people like for people with a white cane or with a guide dog. So kind of the bar was set quite high, I suppose. It was interesting to see how this stacked up. iOS 14 was going to stack up against that. I don't think it failed to disappoint. I think it's been quite good. So I mean, we mentioned back tap a moment ago. This is actually designed with accessibility in mind, but it can be useful for anyone really. So the idea is with back tap is that you can perform certain actions by a double or triple tap in the back of your phone. So these could be, for example, an accessibility feature like Magnifier or Voiceover, but also other actions like maybe it could be launching App Switcher or even taking a screenshot.
Yeah.
Think about some examples where it could be useful. Maybe someone with low vision, they could double tap the back of their phone to turn on Magnifier. Maybe they'll triple tap it to turn on the flashlight. Maybe for someone with VoiceOver, double tap the back of the phone and we can enable VoiceOver, double tap it obviously to turn it off. But also worth mentioning with back tap, what we're finding a lot of people are finding useful is that the available options with back tap can be expanded when we consider that back tap can be set up to launch shortcuts on your iPhone too. So for example, apps such as maybe Sing AI or Be My Eyes could be launched with a double or a triple back tap on your phone. Yes. So yeah, it's worth pointing that out as well.
So tell me something with the back tap feature. Is that something? Is there kind of a particular part of the back of the phone, or is it the whole back of the phone? Somebody doesn't have to locate
the back of the phone, and it's worth pointing out that if you have a protective case on the iPhone, people always say, "Oh, listen, I have a case; it's not going to work," but it actually does work. So it's the back of the phone.
Interesting, yeah.
Double tap.
Okay, so that's very good. Any other features that have kind of the accessibility side?
A couple of other features, some of the highlights, and I say there are several, so we won't go through them all, but some of the other features, notable ones were Voiceover Recognition. So obviously we're all very familiar with VoiceOver, the screen reader on your iPhone. it did receive a very big update in iOS 14 in the form of Voiceover Recognition. I suppose the idea with this is that you can get descriptions of images or screen elements on web pages and in apps that, for example, may not be as accessible as they could be. So there's a few different features in Voiceover Recognition that you can enable in the settings. So if you go into your settings and go into Voiceover and then Voiceover Recognition, you can enable them there. And these will be image description. So it's actually a case where you get your phone to speak descriptions of images and apps and on the web. There's text recognition, where your phone will speak descriptions of text and then images. And then there's also screen recognition. So all these can be enabled in the VoiceOver settings. So with screen recognition, you can have your phone automatically make apps more accessible, where it'll actually recognize items on the screen. So I know in a previous live event we were talking about how we could add a custom label with VoiceOver, but this actually is better again, because the screen recognition feature will actually identify it for you.
Excellent.
So, nice feature.
Yeah. And is that very effective? Is it very reliable?
Yeah, feedback has been good. One thing people have said is that maybe the sound that it makes, you have the option to change what's called a feedback style. So it can play a sound or it can speak, but they actually have the option as well to set it to do nothing. So if voiceover recognition is put into action, so to speak, rather than play a sound or have your phone speak to you, tell you it's working, you can just have it do nothing, and it'll just read out for example, the element on the screen. Yeah. So yeah, feedback has been quite good so far.
Yeah, very good. So that's all under the kind of the recognition aspect. Was there any other developments there with accessibility?
Another big one was changes to the magnifier feature. So a lot of people are using magnifier on their iPhone, particularly people who have low vision would find it useful. It has been around a number of years, magnifier. I think it was released in iOS 10, but have been some significant changes to it this year. So for starters, the interface is being completely enhanced. So we have options for adjusting the brightness, contrast, and adding a filter to change what's being magnified to a color, so it becomes easier to see. It's possible now to rearrange all the controls to kind of customize it to your needs if you wish. It also includes a new multi-shot option as well, so you can take several pictures at a time and then you can place them all up against each other. So it could be useful if you're capturing, for example, different pages of a menu, that kind of thing, or a leaflet. And then the other thing with a magnifier this year is that it actually gets its own app. So you can actually add the Magnifier app to the home screen if you want. So it's obviously just going to show how popular this feature is, that they've actually created an app for it. And anyone who wants to do that, they can just go into the app library, search for Magnifier, and then drag it over onto, for example, the home screen or wherever they want to add it.
Excellent. So there's some great things from an accessibility point of view, but obviously it's not all just about accessibility. There's plenty of other features that will have an impact on how we use the phone. So any other features that are particularly worth mentioning?
Go to a few other features that were added. I'd say the first thing I suppose to point out is that the iPhone, like the home screen on the iPhone on iOS 14, it does look very different to previous versions. So really, to sum it up, it does offer a lot more kind of potential by kind of customizing, customization. So for starters, big changes to the home screen came with the addition of widgets. So now we can add widgets to the home screen. See, they've been available on Android phones for a long time, but now Apple have brought them into iOS.
Apple are catching up a bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think they were long awaited. So some people are enjoying these.
I shouldn't be starting anything here.
So yeah, nice feature. So just to remind anyone, the home screen widgets are like large kind of dynamic. They're like dynamic icons that display app data. Like it could be weather, headlines, that kind of thing, or even things like your step count if you're tracking your steps during the day. There's a new widget gallery, so you can actually go into your widget gallery and you can set what widgets you want on your home screen. And there's also a smart stack widget. which will show kind of relevant apps based on the time of day. So for example, you could have a widget displaying, for example, headlines during the day, and maybe at night you could turn to maybe a podcast that you're listening to, sometime in the evening or at night time. So it's a nice feature. I also mentioned earlier briefly the app library. A lot of people find this useful. So it gives you kind of a new a very kind of efficient way to organize all your apps. So whereas in the past you may have needed to scroll through a lot of pages on your iPhone to find an app that find an app that you want, now you're going to swipe all the way over to the right on your iPhone to access the app library. And here all your apps are automatically categorized into categories like entertainment, there's health and fitness, social, ones like for Facebook and so on, that is productivity and finance. As well as this, what you can do is App Library. You can scroll to all your installed apps that are listed in alphabetical order. So I mentioned, for example, the Magnifier app earlier. So if you go over to the App Library, you can scroll through a list in alphabetical order, or what you can go do is go to the search box at the top of the list and search for the app that you're looking for. So it's a really kind of nice way that Apple have managed to kind of clean up the iPhone's home screen.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
So tell me something. I know there's one or two other features as well, but just to think about what we can expect to be coming from the next version of iOS. We already know some of what to expect from that. Yeah.
Okay. So there is a very kind of exciting development happening at the moment. It's going to be iOS 14.2 is going to be released, I think, hopefully in the start of November. Now, released with this will be a new people detection feature, which will be available on the Magnifier app. So the people detection is coming to the Magnifier app. And how this is going to work is that it's going to use LiDAR to more or less let people determine, okay, well, how far they're away from another person. Now, important to note that this feature is only going to be available on LiDAR-equipped devices. And right now, this is the iPhone 12 Pro, the iPhone 12 Pro Max, and the iPad Pro as well. This year's iPad 2020 iPad Pro. So it won't be available on all devices. Just a bit of information about LiDAR. I know we did briefly talk about it in a previous live event. It stands for light detection and ranging. Essentially, it's a way of measuring distances. So it throws out, your camera will throw out light in the form of like laser pulses at an object, and it tracks how long it takes for those pulses to come back. And doing this, it works out the distance, between two objects. It's actually the technology behind devices like the robot vacuum, even self-driving cars that have been developed too. It can work indoors and outdoors, but it doesn't work in pitch darkness.
Right.
So the idea of this, that people detection feature, it features in the Magnifier app. Let someone be aware of the distance between themselves and another person. So, think about use cases like this. So maybe if someone wants to know if another person's approaching them, if they're out walking, if maybe someone's on a train or a bus, wants to see if there's an empty seats available, or even things like following kind of social distance requirements, right now, and if they're in a checkout line at a shop, make sure they're maintaining kind of social distancing requirements there.
Yeah, very good. So, okay,
really nice feature.
And just a question that's come in there is the app library feature available on the iPhone 7 with iOS 14.1 already installed?
It will be. If it's iOS 14, the app library is there, and all their apps will be categorized into those categories I mentioned earlier. Yeah, so it is there.
Very good. So you can just sort of swipe all the way to the right.
All the way to the right, yeah, and there's the app library. Yeah,
perfect.
Another handy feature, just to mention there, is in the control center in your settings. You can switch on the magnifier. So when your phone is locked and you just swipe up, you swipe up now to access the torch and all that, you can actually now access the magnifier directly from there. So it's a really handy shortcut to have as well. Quite handy to have maybe on the 6S and the 7s, I suppose, without the back tap feature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good. Definitely. Excellent. So a lot of interesting things happening with iOS 14. Would there be any kind of, when we're talking about the latest in Apple devices and even in the operating systems and things like that, is there any particular kind of limitations that people might just want to keep in mind if they're thinking, oh, this all sounds great, I'm going for that?
certainly with the kind of coming out with LiDAR, it's only going to be available on the iPhone 12 Pro, let's say 12 Pro Max, and this year's iPad Pro. So that is a big limitation. But I think it will be an interesting addition coming to iOS 14. But yeah, there are limitations there, So
And hardware-wise, there can be kind of limitations at times as well, can't there? Because repair and things like that can be quite.
Exactly. Yeah. Sean is actually we were looking to talk about that earlier actually about limitations there, Sean. So
the like things like changing parts in the phone, they're actually digitally signed to the phone itself. So if you crack the screen and you put a new screen on it, things wouldn't work correctly, or if the camera was replaced, the camera wouldn't work correctly. You have to go to an Apple shop to get these things fixed, and to get the new parts signed to the motherboard within the phone, or else it won't work correctly. I've even seen people taking apart 2 brand new iPhone 12s and swapping official parts, and it still won't work because each part is digitally signed to that particular phone. So that's kind of Apple, like they would prefer if all repairs were done in their own shops, and then there's the right to repair movement to people want to repair their own device. So that's always up for debate. But just to be aware, if a part is broken, you can't bring the new iPhone 12 to like one of the shops, like maybe a local shop. It has to be an official Apple shop.
Yeah, very good. So there's quite a lot in that. When we're talking about iOS 14 and Apple devices, we know they're excellent, and a lot of the features are so good. But it's always useful just to have all the information if it is something somebody's going to make a big investment on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very good. So let's have a think about the other side of the debate then, I suppose.
Finally.
Not that we're too interested in opening up the argument again, but let's have a think about Android 11. Now, I believe Android 11 had an awful lot of those features already, didn't they?
I think those features are there since the first version of Android. Because
So when we're talking about Android 11, we're talking about many iterations past that. But has Android 11 actually been released yet?
Android 11's released since early September on its own Pixel phones. Okay. So the Google Pixel phone will always get the first release of a new version of the operating system. Other manufacturers, then it's up to themselves when they port the operating system onto their own hardware, or even if they'll do it at all. Some phones, they drop support after a couple of operating systems and it just leaves it on whatever it is. So there's always a bit of research. So
I could have an Android phone, and it might even be a fairly new Android phone, but I won't necessarily get through to Android 11.
No, what the manufacturer might guarantee you get support and operating on certain operating systems. So they might bring you as far as 10, and then they'll drop support for that. And then under new devices, if it's a brand new one and still on 10, that'll probably go to 11. But it's entirely up to the manufacturers. That's out of Google and Android's hands.
Okay, yeah. So that's kind of quite important as well. So if somebody is going to get an Android device, it's useful to know which operating system, particularly when we're thinking about some of the new features and accessibility improvements that are with Android 11. Can you talk us through one or two of those new features?
Yeah, accessibility wise, new features, like I know we spoke about Lookout before, and that's comparative to Seeing AI. So it's an artificial intelligence scanner which is going to use OCR to read documents, and it can describe situations in rooms and things like that. But it's all at early stages.
Yes.
And that actually works internally on the phone rather than being sent over to a cloud computer like Seeing AI would do. So it's all done internally on the phone for people who are concerned about that. Okay. It's always good to use these things and give feedback, like we always say, and I think Lookout is a bit rough around the edges at the minute and can certainly be improved with feedback.
Yeah, okay. And anything else with the Android 11 that we can expect?
Yeah, they're kind of pushing the tactile braille keyboards, so as an input method, so you can activate that on the phones. They've had things like that in the past, but they're claiming now this one's better, so we will have to try that there. and not in terms of visual accessibility, but to have added live captioning. So for people with hearing loss and they can't hear what's in a video, it will automatically put captions into that video. And to save it live transcribe, as you speak, you can open the live transcribe app, which will put into text what you're saying. And we were hoping in the past that maybe that would become useful for people who use braille devices connected to their phones.
Yeah.
But the refresh rate, like the as people talk, the braille has to refresh a lot, so it's very hard. It's very hard to keep up with the conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not beyond the realms if you read fast. But I mean, that's available, and it could come in useful for us in the future. And another major release is they've probably been working on this 4 or 5 years. Is voice access. Now that's for people who don't have, you know, they might have use of their limbs. They could be paralyzed, or for whatever reason, they could have tremors, and they can't touch the screen. Every part of the screen or every location on an app is giving a number, and you can say that number, and it's pressing that part of the screen. So while that's not entirely useful for us, it's worth knowing in case you have any friends out there who maybe had an accident and maybe they haven't got use of certain limbs, and to let them know that, you know, you can access all parts of a phone now with voice access with speech.
Yeah, very good. And I think it's useful to know sometimes as well, even if it's not something that individually a person might use themselves, to know that the manufacturers are actually really delving into some of these things, trying to find ways around things that maybe we might have thought, oh, well, there's not another way to do that. It's interesting anytime we see one of these developments.
Absolutely, because there's a sound amplifier also. I know iPhone have something similar. So you can place it in the middle of a room if you have hearing difficulties, and it's acting as a room listener. So even if you're at a meeting, you could put it in the middle of the meeting and the sound is going to go to like your AirPods or your wireless earphones, and it kind of acts a bit like a hearing aid or a room listener. So someone with dual sensory loss, that is a very, very useful feature on both devices.
Yeah, very good. So just one final question just about the Android 11. Is that going to work if I've got like a 5G phone? There's not going to be any issues or anything with that, is there?
No. Android 11 will work with 5G. So that's depending on if your phone has 5G or not.
Okay.
But it also depends if your area has 5G. But the operating system is built to work with 5G devices.
Yeah. Very good. So plenty of good new features on both iOS and Android, and we certainly want to encourage people, if you've already started using these operating systems and you've got any feedback to give us, we'd love to hear from you. So please do get in touch. You can use the question and answer panel on the right hand side if the show is ongoing. But either way, we'd love to hear from you, and you can email us at labs@ncbi.ie if you've got access to email as well. So very good, interesting piece and interesting news to hear about.